Today we're talking with Dennis Dioukarev, someone who's making history today at the forefront of the nation state Bitcoin adoption in an unlikely place.
It has been up in the biggest newspapers in Sweden.
It went viral on social media. You asked the question of the finance minister, formally advocating for a strategic Bitcoin reserve, a proposal.
This question has been totally absent and non-existent in Sweden on a political level. They basically laughed at the question. Their whole conclusion on these three claims, they're entirely wrong.
Are there specific reasons why you think that Sweden would benefit from a strategic Bitcoin reserve specifically? How do you make that case?
It's very interesting because
Permissionless, the crypto industry's leading developer conference, is coming to Brooklyn this June 24th to the 26th. And this time, Bitcoin is showing up in a big way. That's right. With confidence in Ethereum and Solana on the decline, interest in Bitcoin development is riding high. And yet the way forward for many builders remains unclear. Layer 2s, meta protocols, soft fork upgrades. We'll be talking about the future of Bitcoin and how and if it needs to change. Of course, tickets are going fast. You can get them today at blockworks.co. We'll see you there. Nothing said on Supply Shock is a recommendation to buy or sell any investments or products. This podcast is for informational purposes only, and the views expressed by anyone on the show are solely their opinions, not financial advice or necessarily the views of Blockworks. Our hosts, guests, and the Blockworks team may hold positions in the company's funds or projects discussed. Hey everybody, Pete Rizzo, the Bitcoin historian here on today's episode of Supply Shock. We're bringing on someone who's making history today at the forefront of the nation state Bitcoin adoption in an unlikely place, the European Union. You may have seen him in the Swedish parliament and in front of major Swedish newspapers, pushing for the world's 24th largest economy to allocate, invest, and put Bitcoin on the balance sheet. So today we're talking with Dennis Dioukarev, who for the last decade has been one of the youngest members of the Swedish Riksdag. Hope that I'm getting that right, and been at the forefront of, again, pushing this forward, submitting a letter to the finance minister of Sweden, formally advocating for a strategic Bitcoin reserve, a proposal that went viral on social media, but that really aims to solve a deep systemic problem, diversifying Sweden's reserves, which are today made up of fiat currency and gold, which we know are both trending zero against Bitcoin. So Dennis, welcome to the podcast. Excited to chat.
Thank you, Pete. We're glad to be here today.
Yeah, and very excited to hear your story, right? I think a lot of people saw the moment, you're in parliament, you asked the question of the finance minister, but this really sparked a conversation, it seemed like, in Sweden about something that really people weren't discussing. Maybe they had heard about the Trump strategic Bitcoin reserve, but maybe you could tell us how you got to that moment where you proposed the strategic Bitcoin reserve for Sweden.
Yeah, sure. As you were saying, Pete, this question has been totally absent and non-existent in Sweden on a political level. However, as you said, I asked the question during a public hearing with the Swedish Central Bank. That was. So I asked them, like, given the international trends that we are currently seeing with the US stacking up on Bitcoin, China, it came news just this week out of Latvia that they're going to acquire a strategic Bitcoin reserve. And many other countries, given these international trends, wouldn't it be at least reasonable for them to evaluate the possibility of acquiring a strategic Bitcoin reserve in Sweden alongside the gold reserve, alongside the currency reserve? And we could do this in a budget neutral way without using taxpayers' money, getting confiscated Bitcoin from Swedish authorities and transfer them to the Swedish Central Bank. What they did was that they basically laughed at the question and said no, and kept on reasoning about that they need a liquid asset, that they need a asset that is not correlated with crime or terrorism, which is of course ridiculous, and that they need an asset that is stable in value. And if I may keep on my reasoning here, Pete. So if you look at these three claims, the liquidity of Bitcoin, as I understand, Bitcoin has had 100% uptime since 2013. It is traded 24/7, 365. It has all the features that you want to see in a reserve asset. It is globally transferable. It doesn't know any limits due to jurisdiction. So that is completely wrong. The Swedish Central Bank, of their currency reserve, they have 2.5% of the Norwegian krona is the Norwegian currency. and to claim that the Norwegian krona has better liquidity than Bitcoin, which it's the sixth biggest asset, right? Today. Yeah.
Bigger than Amazon.
Yeah, it's frankly absurd, really. And then you look at the second claim, which was that you don't want any correlation with crime or terrorism. According to Chain Analysis, they're saying that only 0.34% of all Bitcoin transactions are linked to crime. So this is much more lower statistics than for traditional transactions. Also, the Swedish police themselves have said that for them it's much easier to track a cash or a Bitcoin transaction than it is to track a cash transaction, because it's so transparent and every information you need is on the blockchain. And the last claim that they made was that they need something that is stable in value. And it is true that Bitcoin is a more volatile asset than any other asset class. But if you look at the store of value, so I went into Fred.com, it's the Federal Reserve Economic Data, and compared, how many Satoshis it takes to acquire a basket of eggs versus how many US dollars it takes. And what you see through the timeline is that it takes fewer and fewer Satoshis to acquire a basket of eggs and more US dollars. The same trends are visible for acquiring a US home or acquiring gold. So Bitcoin really is a better store of value, obviously, than the US dollar. So if the Swedish Central Bank are basing their whole conclusion on these three claims, they're entirely wrong.
For the past decade, Ledger has been the global leader in digital asset security, trusted to secure more than 20% of the world's crypto assets. Celebrating 10 years of innovation, Ledger is making digital ownership more secure and accessible with their latest products, Ledger Stacks and Ledger Flex. These wallets feature the world's first secure touchscreens, simplifying your digital transactions while ensuring uncompromising security through Ledger's secure chip and proprietary OS. Plus, with the Ledger Security Key app, you can say goodbye to traditional passwords and step up your digital protection. Ready to protect your assets? Choose the most trusted name in hardware wallets, Ledger, and take control of your digital security today at ledger.com. As always, investments and blockchain technology involve risk, terms, and conditions apply. Do your own research.
Well, a lot to unpack there, and certainly a lot of data that is very familiar to Bitcoiners watching Supply Shock who tune in regularly. Avid fans buying, stacking, holding. Curious for your thoughts. The European Union, all the news that we get about Bitcoin seems pretty negative. We saw the Swiss Central Bank as well come out and shut down the Bitcoin strategic reserve idea. So even with all the data that you've said, which I agree, Bitcoin, one of the best performing assets of the last 10 years, maybe even in history. Why is the European Union still so negative, even after, the United States has been progressive, where states are putting it on the balance sheet, the federal government now? Why do you think the European Union is still so negative?
It's always like that. When you don't know, you're always suspicious about these new innovations. You're afraid of what you don't know. And the European Union itself, it is not a context that is known for being innovative, or before time. So these kind of financial trends often they start in the US and later on they come to Europe. Later on they come to Sweden. So we'll just have to see, how long it takes for the European Union to acknowledge that and to recognize that. As I was saying earlier, like the political discussion here has been totally non-existent. And if I talk from a Swedish perspective, my party, the Party of Sweden Democrats, we are the first openly pro-Bitcoin party in the Swedish parliament at this point. And I think it's a important first step for us, to get this discussion up on the political agenda, get it up in the Swedish parliament, but as well with all our parliamentarians in the European Parliament as well. I will be pushing it to them and providing them with facts so that they can argument for Bitcoin on a European level as well.
Are there specific reasons why you think that Sweden would benefit from a strategic Bitcoin reserve specifically? Maybe that's the composition of kind of the country's assets, maybe the state of the economy, obviously one of the world's largest. Are there, when you make the case that Sweden should start buying Bitcoin, should start putting it on in its treasury. How do you make that case?
I don't think that it's country specific. I think like when you think about the strategic Bitcoin reserve, there's so many aspects of Bitcoin, and one of them being it's the geopolitical dimension with Bitcoin. For example, I know that the US, you guys have a strategic oil reserve, for example. You don't have it because there's a lack of oil in the US, but you guys have it because of its geopolitical implications. And then you come into this kind of game theory reasoning, like if everyone else will be doing this, then these countries that are not doing it will get a competitive disadvantage. But then, of course, we could dig in like with Bitcoin specifically. I think there are many similarities with gold. They're both limited in supply. They're both extremely hard to falsify, and they're both are a good store of value. So there are just so many implications of Bitcoin. It's not just a monetary phenomenon; it's a geopolitical phenomenon as well.
So you put forward this proposal, obviously wasn't well received. How do you build on the discussion that you've started? Maybe you can tell us a little bit about the dynamics, right? As I understand it, the Swedish Democrats are, I believe, the sort of largest party.
The largest party.
Right. And then your party is sort of in a coalition government. Maybe you could just tell us the kind of the different parties here, their attitudes towards Bitcoin, and why your party is pro Bitcoin.
Sure. So we are the biggest party within the governing coalition, and we came to power 3 years ago in 2022, and we're the second largest party in Sweden today. At the same time, we are the youngest party in the Swedish parliament as well. We came into office in 2010. So I think the dynamics of Swedish politics is that we kind of took on this role with being kind of anti-establishment, and we always dare to roll up our sleeves and go to work and take on the questions that are before its time, that maybe other people or other parties don't dare to take on, that because they think it's a stigma around those questions. And my party, we are used to take on these kind of questions, and we have no problem with rolling up our sleeves and being pro Bitcoin. And I personally have, I haven't worked with Bitcoin up until now, but I have always recognized the potential within Bitcoin. And now you helped it to make it viral, and after that, it's like you said earlier, it has been up in the biggest newspapers in Sweden. It's been all over X, and I've done multiple local Swedish podcasts as well. And we're really seeing that this issue now is really gaining some momentum. And I think it's very interesting, because also if you know how to use the political system to get results, we've been doing this numerous years, then this is a very interesting first step for us.
So as I understand the government position, again, the parties, there's a liberal party, there's a moderate party, there's your party, the Swedish Democrats, and then the Christian Democrats, and they're sort of the main rival party to yours. Do you think that what we've seen in America is that the Republicans have really embraced Bitcoin and crypto, and the Democrats have come out and they're sort of against it just because the Republicans are for it. So do you think that there's a risk, or that essentially Bitcoin could be politicized in Sweden, or it becomes a partisan political issue?
It could be, but those three parties that you mentioned, they are within the governing coalition, so we are working with them. But they are our rivals, of course. But our biggest rivals is the Social Democratic Party to the Left Party, the Greens, and the Center Party. And of course, there's always a risk that it becomes what do you call it, bipartisan?
Yeah, in America, we have two parties, so we say bipartisan to mean that something is sort of broadly accepted.
Yeah, and I think Bitcoin has the potential here as well, because essentially, I don't think there should be any ideological differences about Bitcoin. Maybe, the parties that they want to see control over the citizens, monitor their transactions. Then we come into this kind of issue of central banking digital currency. Then you could see that it could become party specific. If you don't like freedom, I don't think you will like Bitcoin, obviously.
So within your own party, the discussions, are you having conversations at all levels with your party leaders about Bitcoin, and what is that like, kind of trying to have those conversations with the people above you, or maybe even speaking directly to the kind of ruling government of the country?
Yeah, so at this point, I've had the discussions with my 3 other colleagues from my party, the Sweden Democrats, within the Committee on Finance, and we do have the mandate to formulate our economic policy. So that's where we are at this point, and the 4 of us will file a proposal this fall in the Swedish Parliament to acquire and build up a strategic Bitcoin reserve. What we also will do is that we will take this issue to the negotiations within the governing coalition and try to negotiate it that way, because there's a much higher potential for result when we negotiate it within the 4 parties that are governing in Sweden. Because as a member of parliament, every member of parliament once a year has the opportunity to file a proposal, but they rarely result in anything. And when we will file it for the first time, they won't get a majority. It won't be a majority for it in the Swedish Parliament. But that's really beyond the point. I think that this is an important tool for us to officially file it, get the discussion up on the political agenda, which has been totally absent until now. So it's an important first step. And the second step is that we will negotiate this within the governing coalition.
So in America, we really saw President Trump kind of become the big evangelist for Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. And really a lot of what's been done so far is by executive order. President just kind of coming out saying, I'm the executive of the government. We're going to put this in motion. We haven't really seen Congress in America act. Is there a way maybe in Sweden that happens similarly? Maybe the prime minister comes out and gives some sort of order for this to happen. Do you think something like that could happen?
The executive power in Sweden for our premier minister is not as strong as it is in America. Everything that the governing party or the governing constitution, the governing coalition does, it has to pass the parliament. So it needs to reach a majority in the parliament. So that tool and that power of one individual is not as strong in Sweden as it is in America.
Interesting. Well, it'd be fascinating to see it play out, and really appreciate that you're putting forward the conversation and pushing it ahead. You mentioned other countries, Latvia, the financial minister coming out this week saying that he just expects that Bitcoin reserves will happen, right? I think he basically said that they expect Latvia to do it. Who do you think could be the first movers in Europe? If you're looking at who you're racing against, is it countries like Latvia? Or are there other countries that you expect will move and advance this?
I think it depends on, because you could do this in different ways. One way is like for the state in general, or the political system, to just decide that you need a strategic Bitcoin reserve. The other way is that the central bank does it by themselves. And if you look at a country as Czech Republic, one of their central banks said the other week that they're evaluating the opportunity to acquire a strategic Bitcoin reserve. So I've heard that, I think Germany are doing it, or at least thinking about doing it, Latvia as well. But I don't know at this point, I don't know any European country that where the central bank themselves has said this. I only know, maybe you have some example, but I only heard about Czech Republic. So when a central banker comes out and said this, it's a lot different when just a politician says it, when the central bank goes out and says it. So maybe Czech Republic will be first. Hopefully, it seems like they're doing something right there as well. I know that in Czech Republic, and I think it's Germany, they have zero tax on capital gains on Bitcoin when you held it for 1 year. So maybe it seems like Czech Republic are ahead of their time.
For the past decade, Ledger has been the global leader in digital asset security, trusted to secure more than 20% of the world's crypto assets. Celebrating 10 years of innovation, Ledger is making digital ownership more secure and accessible with their latest products, Ledger Stacks and Ledger Flex. These wallets feature the world's first secure touchscreens, simplifying your digital transactions while ensuring uncompromising security through Ledger's secure chip and proprietary OS. Plus, with the Ledger Security Key app, you can say goodbye to traditional passwords and step up your digital protection. Ready to protect your assets? Choose the most trusted name in hardware wallets, Ledger, and take control of your digital security today at ledger.com. As always, investments and blockchain technology involve risk, terms, and conditions apply. Do your own research.
When you're looking at other countries that own Bitcoin already, right? The United States estimated to own about 200,000 Bitcoin. We don't know the real amount. China estimated at the same.
Is that the state? Is that the state or in general?
Well, that's the estimate of the federal government.
Oh, the federal government.
But we don't know right now, right? There's a large-scale effort in the United States for us to determine that. Do you look at these numbers and are they discouraging? The fact that Sweden would be starting maybe doesn't have kind of the assets from seizures and from things like Silk Road and things like that.
Yeah, definitely, it's an alarm bell for sure that the biggest superpowers in the world are already ahead of us, and we don't really need to look as far as the US or China or any other superpower. We could just look to our neighboring country, Finland. They have a strategic Bitcoin reserve of 2,000 Bitcoins. It's not astronomical numbers, but still, they're come a lot more far than we have done in the other Nordic countries. So, it's an alarming bell, but at the same an inspiration for me as a member of parliament to really take on this question and to educate, my colleagues in the other political parties, get this question up on the political agenda.
You're saying Finland already has legislation like this in place?
I'm not sure whether or not they have legislation or not in place, but I know that they have within the government, they have a strategic Bitcoin reserve from confiscated Bitcoin, 2,000 Bitcoin they're having. I don't think it's they have in Finland. They're within the euro system. So I don't think it's their central bank that are holding it. Probably some political decision that they made to hold Bitcoin that are confiscated from the authorities.
When you think about the other part of the government, of course, the voters, right? Very important. People are voting in their governments. In Sweden, what kind of issues do people care about related to Bitcoin, or people you were talking to own Bitcoin? What are they looking for you to do in terms of legislation? In America, there's a lot of laws about allowing you to hold your own private keys, that prevent central bank digital currencies and things like that. So what kind of issues in Sweden are you seeing? Is it similar to the US or are there local specific issues?
Yeah, I think it is similar to the US. But one question that I've heard multiple times that we as a party haven't yet addressed, but it's the question of mining. And I know that you guys done it good in Texas. And as I've understood, like in Sweden, we have a cold climate, which is good for natural cooling. We have strong institutions. We have strong property rights. We have relative security, and these are all good things for a context where you want to mine Bitcoin. We haven't adopted this yet to our policy platform. For us, I think the first step is the strategic Bitcoin reserve, since the discussion in Sweden is not yet mature, to take on this kind of other issues. I think the first step is the strategic Bitcoin reserve. And also, as you mentioned about CBDCs, this central banking digital currency, and not a lot of people know, what it is. But Bitcoiners sure do. And when I talk to Swedish Bitcoiners, and I told them that in Sweden, they already tried to redefine what legal tender is. Because in Sweden, in order to build up CBDC, you need to redefine legal tender and broaden the definition. I managed to stop this in the committee because I recognized the threats and the potential of this of introducing CBDC. What was scary was that my colleagues from the other parties, they didn't understand really the implications of this, because on paper, central bank digital currency could sound good, but I see numerous risks with this. If I may reason about this, it's the question of control and integrity. If a central bank want to monitor all your transactions, that would be possible with CBDC. If they want to impose negative interest rates on your savings, which essentially would be a tax on savings in order to stimulate the economy, stimulate consumption, this is possible with CBDC. But the worst one, personally, for me, it's the one that they call programmability. Like, let's say that we get a central bank. At this point, I trust our central bank. I don't think they're up to something that shady. I just want to state that for the record. But who knows, in the future, 5, 10, 15 years of time, maybe we get a central bank in Sweden or, Fed in the US that want to achieve certain political goals. It might be climate goals. They might want to limit how much gas you can buy each week, or limit, the consumption of meat, because it is, but they're saying it's bad for the environment. I don't understand how, but it's supposedly bad for the environment. Or they want to, compensate lower income groups for inflation, but they want the money only to be spent on certain things. These are all things that is possible with a central bank digital currency, and I think this would be a disaster for personal freedom and privacy, and that's why I'm against it, because it is CBDCs are really the opposite of what Bitcoin stands for. CBDCs is all about centralization of power, while Bitcoin is decentralization of power, and is really an antidote to CBDCs in Sweden, and that's why I'm opposing it. And I've found that the Bitcoiners in Sweden, that they are really happy about it.
Let's talk about the digital euro. We hear about this every few years, that there's going to be some sort of European Union-wide effort to put in place something like digital money. How is that progressing? Is that a real threat? Do you think that there could be a real push for that in the next few years?
Yeah, when it comes to CBDC on the euro level, the e-euro, that project is called, that, it's real, it's coming. They're on the project level still, but I think it will come the next 1 or 2 year. They will roll it out as a retail CBDC. Hence, normal consumers will be able to use it in their day-to-day transactions. And as a politician and as a representative of the people, that was one of my arguments as well. Like, let's just see how it goes on the European level, and let's see if the risks realize. Then we got it on paper that it would be a bad idea for Sweden as well. So on the European level, it's coming. On the Swedish level, in Sweden, I think the Riksbank's, our central bank's e-krona project, that is called, is temporarily put on hold, as I understood.
How do you look at what the United States is doing with stablecoins, particularly, the crypto market outside of Bitcoin also is growing. The, Trump administration wants to grow US dollar stablecoins. How do you look at that and what's happening there? Is that something that there'd even be conversation about in Sweden to try to replicate? Obviously, the dollar in the kind of crypto world is really strong. We don't see a sort of stable euro or a stable yen. How do you think about that?
If we're talking about stable coins, this has not been an active discussion in Sweden or for me. But if we're talking about the broader discussion about the fiat currency system, then of course, I think in that sense, I think it's just logical that Bitcoin came up as a big alternative to today's currency system, because the central banks really, since the pandemic, has been flooded the market with liquidity, hence being partly responsible for the inflation that we've been seeing the last couple of years. And this has really exposed the flaws of the current monetary system. At the same time, the U.S. government, they have a spending problem, 120% debt to GDP ratio. They spend more on Medicare, Social Security, and education last year than they did. They spend more on net interest payments on the debt than they did on Medicare, Social Security, and Medicare last year, on last year's numbers. And in this context, I understand that people are looking into different alternatives. They're looking into Bitcoin, to stable coins, and really to anything that feels more safe or more logical than the current monetary system. But to answer your question, the broader discussion about stable coins hasn't really been up to discussion in Sweden just yet.
I'm curious on the local level. You're obviously a representative for sort of a region in Sweden. Is there anything going on at the local level? We're seeing a lot of kind of cities and towns like Lugano in Switzerland, for example, or El Zante in El Salvador, kind of make a push to get local adoption or commerce going. Is there anything that you're involved with at the local level in your jurisdiction related to Bitcoin?
Not at all, because it's a national question for us. The municipalities in Sweden, they don't have that power to take on those decisions themselves. So this is entirely a national question and a question for the central bank. But what's interesting is that I'm representing Gothenburg, and as you may or may not know, Pete, that there been another politician from the Center Party that proposed the strategic Bitcoin reserve as well in Sweden, and we both are from the same region. We're both from Gothenburg. We're both Gothenburgers, West Coasters, different parties, but no, there is not really a local initiatives with regards to Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies.
Let's talk a little bit about your journey. Obviously, you're pushing for this on the national level. How did you get involved in Bitcoin? When did you first hear about it, and when did you find Satoshi, so to speak?
Yeah. I think I've heard of Bitcoin like for the first time, as I remember now, maybe 13 or 14 or something like that. And really, the other day I was thinking about, I had a lunch in 2017 in the Parliament's restaurants, and I sat with some of my colleagues discussing, we discussed different investments, and I said, maybe I should buy one Bitcoin, in 2017. But I thought it feels a little bit expensive at this point. And afterhand, I see that might be my worst investment decision ever, to not acquire Bitcoin in 2007. But today I own a little bit of Bitcoin in my personal portfolio. I think we should have a portfolio with different assets, and I hold some Bitcoin. But really, when on a political level, the first time I took on this question, it was 6 or 7 weeks ago or something, when I asked the question to our central bank. And after that, I've just kind of been surfing that wave. And I also got this book.
It's classic.
The Bitcoin Standard, as I understood from some local Bitcoiners here, that is kind of the Bible and the first book that you should start reading when you're on your Bitcoin learning journey.
Well, if it makes you feel better about not buying Bitcoin, I wrote my first article about Bitcoin when it was $50. So I definitely should have bought back then.
Yeah. We all made our mistakes.
Yeah, we're all late. So maybe you can talk a little bit more about why Bitcoin aligns with your values, and just it sounds like the Swedish Democrats are a bit of a conservative party. Why does it align with just your party platform and your personal beliefs?
Yeah, because we're a party that really enhances the personal freedom and integrity. We are skeptical of EU. We are skeptical of the European Central Bank. We are skeptical to mass surveillance of the general public. And because of that we really love freedom. We think that a decentralized governing is the best form of governing. Then it's just natural that we see Bitcoin as an interesting alternative as well. And we are critical of today's monetary system, and what the central banks have been doing with losing, at least in Sweden. They bought corporate bonds in the pandemic, and then the rates went up, and they made a huge losses on that. So really, it's about personal freedom and integrity. And I also want to state that conservatism in Sweden doesn't mean the same thing that conservatism in America. It's a whole different spectrum of conservatism. My party, we are pro law and order. We want to see a sustainable migration policy, lower taxes when we can get that, lower income spending, or lower spending, lower government spending. These are traditional right-wing conservative values as they are in the States. But at the same time, we want to see a strong social security network, for those who get unemployed, sick, or just old. So we really take, we're a pragmatical party. We take the best elements from right and left and combine it to our own unique mix. And for us, personal freedom, integrity, privacy has always been important values in our work. So that's why it just came natural to me to kind of be pro Bitcoin.
And when you think about, Bitcoin, just being so different, right? This is kind of the first non-government currency on a mass scale. Have you thought at all about how you think this might just change the world just over time, and what you think, Sweden might look like in 10 to 20 years? Let's just say the strategic Bitcoin reserve happens. What kind of world do you think that will bring?
It's a big question. And I think it all depends on how the general monetary system evolves. I think it would be reasonable to believe that these two systems will run smoothly side by side. I'm not sure. There are many people speculating on, the US dollar, that it will lose its power as a world reserve asset. Maybe it will, but I think in that case, then we have other problems in the world as well. So it's a hard question, but I recognize the potential of Bitcoin within the payment system as a new currency, but also other implications as well. If you take the blockchain technology and think about what it could mean, for example, for capital markets, if we could tokenize equity, for example, what would that mean for small, medium enterprises? Maybe they could get a new way of raising funds, maybe as an alternative to IPOs. So it has, the whole blockchain technology, Bitcoin, it has so many implications, and it's really hard to know, obviously, what it would mean for the world. But I, as a politician, recognize its potential, and unlike many central banks, I don't categorically deny the potential. I'm open to every possible outcome. Maybe this is our iPhone moment. Maybe this is our internet moment. I don't know that, but I recognize its potential for that. And I guess we'll have to see.
So you're going to the Bitcoin conference in a couple weeks out in Las Vegas. Is that correct? Will you be coming there to speak?
I will not.
Oh, unfortunate. Okay, yeah. So I was going to ask, how are you going to continue your Bitcoin journey?
Yeah, I think, like I said, right now I'm just gonna try to surf this wave, and I think what we are doing today is an important and huge step for the Bitcoin community in Sweden, but on a broader international level as well, because this is obviously an international movement that I want to be a part of. I want to do my part to shed light on Bitcoin, and also educate the other parliamentarians in the other parties, the general public, but also, for example, the banking sector in Sweden. I was visiting one of the biggest commercial banks the other week, and I held a discussion with them about Bitcoin and amongst other things. And I told them, like, in the US, you guys, you have hedge funds buying Bitcoin. You have banks open up banks account for buying, selling, and even lending with Bitcoin as a security. In Sweden, the banks are still, they're not categorically denying Bitcoin's potential as the central bank is, but they're still a little bit skeptical. And I told them, like, I think that the first bank in Sweden that opens up in a Bitcoin friendly direction will have a lot to gain in terms of new customers. So that was my message to them, and I will try to advocate for Bitcoin within my party, and we are the first pro Bitcoin party today. And I think the political process already started, and I will just continue it.
What's preventing the financial institutions in Sweden from being involved in Bitcoin today? Are there already exchange-traded products and things like that for people to do?
Yeah, there are ETFs, you can buy, obviously, but the biggest banks, they haven't opened, any accounts for owing Bitcoin as an asset. And I think the biggest issue is that there's still, the whole banking system are still a little bit suspicious about Bitcoin, and it's based all on the wrong conclusions. And I think, the financial trends that starts in the US sooner or later comes to Europe and Sweden, and it will come to Sweden as well. The question is just not about, if, it's about when it will come to Sweden.
Well, Dennis, appreciate you coming on and informing us about all the great work you're doing in Sweden. Where can people follow you? How do they support this effort to bring awareness to Bitcoin in Sweden and in Europe?
Yeah, thank you very much, Pete, to having the opportunity to come and speak at your podcast. And if people want to follow me, it's the easiest is to access through X, and it's just my name, Dennis Dioukarev, and you'll find me there.
Awesome. Well, Dennis, again, appreciate what you're doing. And obviously this discussion will be continuing in many places. I'll be at Permissionless next in June in New York City. So if you're following along the podcast, listening along, we're going to have a lot of great discussions about strategic Bitcoin reserves and related topics in New York City. That's June 24th to the 26th. In the meantime, thank you for listening. Go check out Dennis's work. Need more Bitcoin and strategic reserves on the world stage. This has been Supply Shock, a Blockworks podcast.